Ladies and gentlemen, we are live for the Way Forward weekend show. We're going to ask ourselves the question, because we're going to ask you the question today. Why is education in America failing? Unless you are one of those that just sticks your head in the sand and says, well, I don't see any problems. Everything is good. I mean, it's just like it was back in the day. No. Don't do that to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. That's one of the things that we do on this show, as we try to tell people not to lie to themselves. And if you're in education today, you'll definitely want to hang around for this episode. If you're one of those people that's concerned about education, which should be all of you today, you're going to also want to stick around today to hear this conversation that we're having, because we're not the type of people that just sit around and talk about stuff. We are people who do things in our lives. And the Way Forward show exists so that we can motivate and inspire the church, God's people, to respond to God, for Christ, in culture. And so we're bringing Jason on here in just a few moments. It's the Way Forward show. I can't find the button. Oh, now I found it. Yo.
What's up, my man?
What's going on, man? Way Forward. Let me get this stuff going on here. I get to get all the things going on. I love it. You made him wait for this episode.
I guess. Sorry about last week. It's crazy.
Hey, did you see any of that?
I saw bits and pieces of it, but I was running. I just stopped, I think, yesterday, and I'm going to pick back up again tomorrow.
Okay.
We're coming into spring, and that's just the kind of the nature of the beast. So.
Sure.
Yep.
Totally understand that, and I'm super excited that you could join. We talked about this a few weeks ago, because this is going to be a passion point in which I don't even know if after the introduction, I don't even know if I say anything for the rest of the show. I just gonna let you take it, run with it. And here we go. Litchfield Christian School. I just gotta get my pom-poms out, and then I'm just gonna be cheering for the rest of the episode. And so
that's good, because we could use cheerleaders. It's an interesting topic right now. Education's on the ballot. A lot of opinions, a lot of strong opinions.
Opinions. There's a lot of heat out there, but we're going to bring some light today
on just the state we're in, and there's education's been on the discussion point for a long time, right? I mean,
yes,
we've been steadily watching things happen where we've been kind of alarmed and saying, hey, our national test scores are continuing to dropping. Our ranking among the world continues to drop, and our kids are not performing well. And then all of a sudden, in the last couple of years, we've added activism into the classroom.
Sure.
And we're very polarized as a nation. So, this is a very hot topic.
Yes. And so we want you to bring that smoke. The comment section is on today. Let you guys know, stay classy out there. But at the same time, we do want you guys to entertain this conversation in a way that is substantive, that is real. And we never have a problem with our audiences doing that. We just wanted to make mention of the fact that you guys can be a part of the show. But if you get crazy out there, we're not putting that up on the screen.
We have a tendency to get a little crazy out there.
Fight. Yeah, we're not putting that up on the screen. We'll look at the comment. We'll reference the comment. We might even call you out, but we're not putting that on the screen.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
good to get into.
Let's officially intro this, and then I'll give some tags. You can pray us in, and then we will get started today. It's the Way Forward show.
Government officials insist that
All right, a couple of tags for the show today, just so you guys know. For using source material today, we're using that under the guise of the Copyright Act of 1976 that allows us news, reporting, teaching, scholarship, research, and criticism of things that we're talking about here today, not in a negative way, but in a way that hopefully is thoughtful. If you haven't already liked and subscribed, like this show and subscribe to it, and then tell all your friends about it, because I think the word of mouth is still the best form of communication that we have today. And so please do that. Without further ado, the good Right Reverend.
Father, I just thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to talk with Erskine about something I'm passionate about, something that I think we all need to be passionate about. Just ask for discernment, wisdom as we discuss things, we talk. Kindness, gentleness, at the same time speaking truth with conviction. We just ask you to be glorified and for us to have joy. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, our top story for today, modern education. Yes, we need some education.
Yeah.
Can I do this from the standpoint of just kind of setting this up a little bit? I'm trying to think with just, some background things. All right, so let me just share this. I've got this all in the show notes for today, but the legacy media tries to account for what's going on in the education system. And let me just give you a couple of moments of that. And teachers, why education is failing in America. And I'll just give you a couple of moments of that at the beginning. And they talk about some Common Core stuff. There'll be some statistics they throw out there, but just a couple of moments of this, and then we can dive headlong into what is sort of our takeaways about some things.
2009, Common Core was an ambitious initiative to revolutionize the American education system. 41 states, the District of Columbia, and 4 territories signed up to participate. National leaders from Bill Gates to President Obama supported the idea of the Common Curriculum, and it cost an estimated $15.8 billion to implement.
They thought standards were just too low in the U.S. and that we could have kids learn more in school if we raise standards. Quite frankly, they didn't really trust the schools to do this on their own.
One of the most challenging aspects was we understood our curriculum and we were basically thrown a curveball into what it was and had to really adopt new practices.
But a couple of years after its launch, it was met with confusion and ridicule.
Some of the math items that were mocked, I think deserved to be mocked, frankly. They were just very poor items.
People deserve to know the truth, but it wasn't the truth. I was 15 in 1977, and I'll be 30 next week.
I don't think that math checks out.
I don't get math. I went to school in the 2000s, and we were taught Common Core.
All of a sudden, parents were having to.
All right, I'll stop it there. I'll stop it there. That's enough to get people's heckles up today. So
That's hilarious.
let's just dive in. Let's just do that.
Uh,
So that's one of the issues that's out there. There's obviously numerous other issues that are out there, and I don't know where you want to start with this, but we'll start anywhere and we'll hit something.
Okay, so with Common Core, that is one of the big discussion points. Common Core does a lot of things. First of all, it creates a divide between parents and their children. So it used to be, parents could sit down with their kids and help them out with the homework. So 2 + 2, right? And you can sit down. Well, this is how you do it, and there was some continuity. Well, Common Core destroyed that because there was no continuity whatsoever with how they were doing math and how their parents grew up doing math. Secondly, Common Core over sophisticated things and created more steps that I think was supposed to create this critical thinking, but it created a lot of confusion. What the kids wind up doing, because this is why having the doctrine of total depravity is important, because your little sinful nature is going to find the easiest way out. And lo and behold, Common Core provides a lot of the answers. You just go find the answers and plug it in. That's part of the curriculum. And so that there was that. And then what you see is the results from 2009. So we're over 10 years of Common Core, okay? And using Common Core, 80% of students are graduating high school. Not bad numbers, but they could be better. Yet less than half those students are ready for what's coming after high school, whether it's trade school or college. Meaning that 80% of our school seniors, they receive a diploma, but less than half of them are proficient in reading and math. So that's what they're seeing, right? That's according to the U.S. Department of Education.
Okay.
Okay, and so there's a big gap missing in the curriculum. Now, I should be clear about this, and I've been clear about this every time I've spoken about this, because I get tagged as if I'm anti public school teachers,
Okay,
and I'm not. I'm
sure.
not.
Let's
to
let
put
you
a
get in
disclaimer
trouble for
out
what you're
there.
actually saying, not what
That's
you're not
right.
saying.
That's right. Because people don't do their homework. They sit there and listen to a tag or something like that, or watch something, and they're not listening to what I'm saying. The system is broken. That's the issue. The system, public school system, has been broken for a while. COVID exacerbated things, but COVID is not the problem. There was a huge cultural, philosophical, methodological problem happening long before COVID hit. COVID just kind of was a straw that broke the camel's back, I think.
Sure.
And what you have is you have a system that's broken, that's putting teachers in a spot, I think, to fail. And they're leaving education in droves because they're not feeling supported, they're not accomplishing their task, and they're not really getting to teach like they wanted to teach. And so I should be very clear that the system is broken. The system's got problems. It's got philosophical problems, it's got methodological problems, and it's got a cultural problem.
Do you
Those
think it
are
also has? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Do you think it also has some theological problems?
Oh, it's got massive theological problems.
Okay.
It's adopted a reconstructionist kind of progressive cultural Marxist ideology. That's not just happened in the last couple of years. That philosophy has been in play, I would say, since the 60s for sure, if not earlier than that.
Okay.
Because essentially what's happened is the school system was a classical liberal arts philosophy for a long time. And it began to move into a kind of, when postmodernism became the big school of thought among the universities, and they began to teach their teachers postmodernism. Postmodernism essentially, as you know, there's no solid truth. And your truth can be your truth, and everything is relative. Well, once that idea began to implement in education, the progressive theory begins to utilize postmodernism inside of its curriculum and its core, and then it begins to turn things upside down. Particularly what it did was it turned the classroom upside down so that teachers are no longer the authoritarian mentor, guide, sage in the classroom. They're more facilitators. And then it created a student-centered education, not what the students need, it's what the students want. And they have this idea that kids are, just naturally learners, so just let them kind of naturally learn inside the classroom. Well, kids are also sinners, and if you just let them be, they tend to get in trouble, right? So they need reins. And so postmodernism influenced progressivism, which then is now moved into this reconstructionist, as if we got to turn everything on its head. And this is where you have intersectionality and you have the kind of cultural Marxist ideas making their play, because the philosophy of reconstructionism is deconstruct everything and put it back together again according to your truth. And that's what's happening. So when people ask, well, why in the world are we talking about these political ideas in the classroom, or why are we doing act? Well, it's because your philosophy is pushing that. That's
Sure.
why it's natural there. That led to a methodological problem, which allowed Common Core to come in and create these really unhealthy, not helpful methods to doing school. And it created a lot of frustration and disconnect between the parents and the school and the kids in the school. And when it all comes together, when you have a turned upside down classroom with a turned upside down philosophy, with a turned upside down methodology, you have a culture now in the school that's not safe. And that's the system, right? You have kids doing things in the bathroom with their phones and recording things, and you have kids running, teachers not having the authority or the ability to really manage their classrooms well. You got these crazy policies coming down, and it becomes a very kind of unsafe learning environment. And the teachers are busting their tails to try to figure it out. And then what they're told is be more creative, be more creative, be more creative. And you're like, I'm out of creativity. I need help. I need help to keep it going. And so that, in my estimation, as I'm watching it, you're having overcrowded, non-parent involved, classrooms with the teachers not giving support, a curriculum that's out of whack, that's not producing the results it needs to produce for kids to have the ability to do math and reading outside of high school. They're not doing well in college. We're continually falling. And like you said, you can't put your head in the sand, and you can't unknow what you know, as Randy Bland would say. Right? You can't unknow what you know.
Let's look at the piece on teacher pay really quickly here, because all of those points are good points. We'll tease those out throughout the rest of our broadcast today. You guys jump in the conversation and talk to us about maybe from your locale what it is that you're seeing in the public school. I'm sure at some point we're going to talk about private school and also homeschool and various movements. But let's look at teacher pay and some of the discussion that goes on there.
Almost everyone remembers that one teacher who had a transformative impact on their life. The teacher that made school exciting and interesting and that genuinely cared. Teacher quality is the #1 school-related factor to student achievement.
So no stress on that this weekend, Anna. It's going to be beautiful weather, so go enjoy it. In the meantime, you all take good care of yourselves, all right? I'm going to let you go a couple minutes early today.
This is an extremely important profession. Teachers literally have the future of the country in front of them every day.
But the teaching profession is in turmoil. The wage gap between teachers and others with the same level of education and experience is nearly 20% and growing.
I think I'd be remiss to say I haven't had that moment where I was like, I could probably double my salary if I left and went elsewhere. I've never been really tempted enough to actually pull the trigger. And I really love what I do. And there is no other job like this.
In some areas of the country, up to a quarter of teachers leave the profession annually, and about 1/5 of the workforce has to resort to a second job. The pandemic is likely making things worse.
The exodus of some of our best and brightest teachers is that they realize they can't sustain a life that they had dreamed of.
So why are teachers paid so little, and is there anything that can be done to change that?
All right, let's talk a little bit about that subject matter, because I feel like, Jason, a lot of times when I've had this discussion, the teachers themselves kind of get on edge and they're like, well, are you blaming us? Because everybody's blaming us. The parents are blaming us. The schools are blaming us. Everybody's blaming us. And I think what we want to do is we want to talk about this as more of a comprehensive system where downstream of that system or interrelated to that system, if one part of it is broken, then all of it is just going to get haywire before too much longer. And that is going to impact the teachers. And I think that's why you see some of the statistics of teachers who are leaving the profession, and there's not a lot of backfilling in some of those areas. And so the creativity is crisis creativity as opposed to just overflow creativity. And there's a difference between the two of those things.
It's an interesting dynamic because teachers, most of the teachers I've worked with and did life with for several years, get up every day. Nobody gets up and says, man, I'm going to suck at my job today, and nobody goes into the classroom wanting kids to fail. Nobody does that. I think there are some teachers who are just kind of buying their time until they can get, get their retirement. But those teachers are few and far between. Most teachers get up every day trying to make it work and trying to figure out a way to get their kids to be successful. And the pay is a funny thing because on this end of things, I could say they're paid twice as much as private school teachers for the most part, on average, and they got a pretty decent retirement, and they get still a couple of months off from school, and it's all tax based, right? And they have a big fat union that's lobbying for them, and they have all this control over the kids and the system. So on this side of things, I have a different perspective now as when I was in public school because I'm in a different situation. Though I do think. Go ahead.
I was going to say, why don't you just give a little bit of your qualifications in terms of your interaction in the public school? Both you and I have been employed. I retired from the Texas Teachers Association in the public school. And so this is something that we've experienced in a variety of different ways. And so why don't you just talk a little bit about that? Because maybe somebody's watching today and they're saying, well, you guys are maybe throwing stones at public school and you guys have never seen what it really is like on the inside there. And I want to make sure that people are well aware of the fact that we have spent numerous years and hours in the public school to be able to think through what alternatives might be to that system.
So from my early working days as a college student, I've been inside education, whether I was working with at-risk kids on one-on-one in education, or I developed a mentoring program for at-risk kids inside of a school. I taught public school in Texas. I taught private school in Louisville. I wound up getting my doctorate of educational ministry from Southern. All that revolves around some kind of educational format, some kind of educational experience. And I've been inside the public school system. I've been inside the private school system. I've done homeschooling. I've got my hands just about everything I can think of education wise, just to get those experiences and understand. So I have a different perspective. I'm not just, only public school, or I'm just not only private school or just solely homeschool. I've seen all of them, and I've experienced all of them to some degree. And I can tell you that educating a child, that lady is right. It's a remarkable opportunity. It's a calling, and you have an opportunity to set the future forward. And I think there are people in the government who know that, which is why they're going after the educational system, because they know they could grab these children and begin to put ideas in their head that I don't think are very healthy and very good. But I don't think that's the majority of your teachers who are trying to get up every day and teach this kid to read. I think most of them are just trying to get up and use the resources they have and to get after it, but the system itself is not helping them. And their pay is a funny thing, because on the one hand, they're not paid what they're worth. On the other hand, they get a pretty consistent raise in their retirement. And I mean, there's a tension there. I'm not trying to step on hands. I mean, I know that I think most teachers have to have two incomes in the house to make it work, but they're not as bad as some, and they're not as good as others. There's somewhere in between there.
Yeah.
So
my good friend Howard says this comment, and this is awesome. This is an awesome topic, Erskine. I feel every teachers have one emotion job. There is educating our young people, but also feel if their hands are tied, I think he wants to say tied, with less resources available to them.
Yeah. And it's not just the resources, right? It's the ability to act and move. Like, there are restraints there that says you can do this, but you can't do that. You can have this, but you can't have that. And some of those restraints that are there keep the teacher from being able to really manage their classroom in a way that's productive. That's one of the core issues. We spend almost $24,000 on a student per student. I think we're the leading country in the world who spends the most per student.
Okay.
On education. So it's not that we're lacking money or resources, even though they say they are, but we're spending a ton of cash on these kids. You can actually educate a child pretty well on a lot less than that. Like, you could, for instance, for our school, tuition is gonna be around $4,000 to $4,300 a year per student. And there are schools around Illinois who have that same tuition, and their kids are knocking it out of the park at $4,000. So it's not that you need more money to get it done. You need the ability to actually exercise educational philosophy and methodology, and you need to be able to create a culture in the school that's wise and good and virtuous and safe. And there are some public schools that are doing that, but there are also a lot of schools that aren't. And so that number that aren't is overwhelming.
Yeah,
because it's affecting the trend down.
And so to this point, we've basically had a conversation about the public school, the system, the philosophy, the theology, and all those things related to it. As parents and as leaders, we have an opportunity to do something that's different, because we have private schools, parochial schools, we bring the Catholics into this, and then we also have homeschool options that are available. And so parents have the ability in our country still, at least.
That's right.
This will be a timestamp. This is 2024. This may not be the same thing in 2025, but at this point, parents still have some educational opportunities to be able to say, well, if that's not working, maybe we look at this. And so I want to show a little bit of the homeschool movement and people's other educational choices that are there.
In an institution, think of all the things that they've learned up until that point. They've learned basic hygiene, language, motor skills, social decorum, and the basis for moral conduct. So a definition that I think shows an appreciation for that full scope of education is the transmission of culture. And in order to understand what that means, we have to define what culture means. Culture in this sense means a way of life. It's the knowledge, the technology, the science, the beliefs, the ethics, and probably most importantly, the religion or the cult, the worship, because cult is the root of culture that is expressed through a way of life. Every good civilization starts with a creed of beliefs, and then that creed of beliefs is incarnated into a way of life.
There you go, Jason.
And that's what a culture is.
That's your people.
And if that civilization prospers, it would be an injustice not to transmit that prosperity to future generations. And this prosperity isn't just merely a prosperity of material goods, but it's the way of life that produced that prosperity and those material goods. Otherwise, that material prosperity will turn to ash in the hands of those future generations or those heirs. That's why we have education, to ensure that those future generations don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time, that they don't have to solve all the same problems that past generations have already figured out. And in order to educate future generations, you have to have a shared way of life and a shared culture. No civilization can survive the death of its culture. And this is where we get to the problem of education, because modern Western civilization has no shared culture. We discarded it in favor of a new vision of cultural relativism, which is, by the way, a goal right out of the Marxist revolutionary playbook. In Mao's revolutionary China, for example, they had identified the four olds which had to be destroyed in order to instantiate their new cultural revolution. So in their case, the four olds were the habits, the customs, the beliefs, and the culture of their ancestors. Now that we have successfully abandoned the culture of our own ancestors, we call ourselves multicultural. But that isn't actually true. Anybody who wants to retain their culture will find that just by participating in a modern Western country like Canada, where I live, they will have their culture diluted just by being immersed in it. You see this with immigrants, for example. The first generation places a lot of emphasis on retaining and preserving their heritage and their culture. But by the second or third generation, they witness their descendants and their culture getting diluted into the basic cultural relativism that they live within.
Okay, so
yeah, that's really insightful, because that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah. And this video is in the show notes today, and it's the single reason to homeschool because of that transmission of culture. And I would say, from watching this on other sources, there are people who are saying, hey, we want there to be gender equality. We want there to be some of these progressive ideologies taught to our kids, that we don't feel the public school has done enough of those things. And so we're going to homeschool, whereas before it was typically a conservative and religious movement back in the 1970s. We're finding people today who are homeschooling who are saying, no, we want the progressive agenda for our kids. We want these things to be taught to our kids, and the school is not going far enough in teaching them. So we're going to bring them home. We're going to put them in an environment where we can indoctrinate them in the culture that we want as well. And so that's an interesting feature in modern days, all relating to homeschool, public school, private school, and the different educational choices that are out there.
Well, schools are actually, public schools are kind of on the decline, if you will.
Sure.
So many of schools, like in California and Illinois, for instance, are close to shutting down or actually have shut down. I think I read an article 2 weeks ago that said something like 30% of California's schools are teetering on that number of shutting down, not having enough kids in the school to actually warrant the money that's going into it. And so you're seeing this movement, like you said, of homeschool or private school, and it's not just for religious reasons. There's all kinds of schools, private schools popping up that have all kinds of ideologies, but they're just not happy with the public school system. Primarily, I think, for conservative type people, it's the lack of the virtues and the values that follow conservatism, and for religious people, it's the lack of the religious values and stuff. But for a lot of folks, it's not about virtue or religion. It's just about standards. Like, I want my child to achieve more standards. I don't want them to be a part of the 80% that's not qualified to do anything after high school because they can't read or do math. So
Right.
you're hearing a lot of, that's where you're getting this new wave of people who are leaving the public education system, not for religious reasons or value, moral reasons, but for simply that I want my child to achieve more. And either we're going to do it ourselves or we're going to find a school that has that as a standard. And you can find that in Montessori. You can find that in schools that are kind of virtue type schools. They're popping up all over. So,
Right.
So just to be clear, this is not just a conservative religious movement. This is a broader movement of parents and people who are saying the system is broken. I mean, the system is not working, so we're going to try something else. And we live in a country that gives us the constitutional right to do that. And some states, like Florida, actually will give you tax money back, school choice, to actually do it. Illinois won't at all.
Call them out. Can we call you out, Illinois? Why won't you? Why won't you?
Yeah, they tell you they will, but we have such a massive influence of the school union, which I can't stand one bit, pushing and lobbying that they won't give us our tax money back to put towards our own decision for school. Now you go to Florida, and I think you get something like $8,500 or something per kid to get to whatever school you want to go to.
Yeah.
And a lot of states are trying to work that out for their constituents. Not Illinois.
Absolutely. I think we just went to a meeting, and is Kelly? Is she somewhere over there? We got a live studio audience. She's not in the house. At any rate, went to a meeting the other day that was principally about dual enrollment. Now that our kids are kind of looking at that, the price of the class was like, I don't know if it's $500 or $5,000, but the state will give you back $5,000. So it was just like a little bit over that. And so for the dual enrollment classes, you'd essentially be paying $50 to be doing those types of things. And so giving those educational incentives for parents to sort of figure some things out and to help their kids move forward faster is a very helpful thing that I think the state of Tennessee is doing. And so we want to call out Illinois because they are behind the curve on this one.
Listen, if the real goal is we want our citizens to be equipped to do whatever, competent, confident, to do whatever they want to do when they graduate high school. So if that's really our goal, then I think we should open up whatever means the parents feel is best. And that's really the problem, is the state, and I would contend some of the educational system do not believe that the parents are equipped to make that decision. And so what you have is this big divide between parents and the school system. And that divide has been happening for a long time. Now, part of that is the parents' fault, because they just have chosen to neglect their child's education. They kind of put their head in their sand and say, hey, I'm going to send you off to do whatever. But the other part of that is the school making decisions that don't include or not inviting the parents into it.
Right.
Common Core, again, is one of those decisions. Or schools not having a parent involvement framework to work from, a plan that engages parents and works with them. I think Litchfield is actually doing a pretty good job of trying to engage parents. I've seen a lot of things they're putting out of trying to invite the community in more. And one of the things I can appreciate about Litchfield is I think that they're doing an excellent job of trying to draw parents who are maybe even suspicious of the school to the school and being involved in things. They do things like the senior project that's pretty cool, that they invite the community in to see seniors kind of put on this last thing. And they do try to do that. Now, on the other hand, they're not friendly towards homeschool families, and they're not engaged. They're kind of tough to work with when it comes to private school stuff. But hats off to Litchfield for trying to engage parents. That's not happening in a lot of schools. Matter of fact, in Ohio, they just passed a law that said that if a child goes there and decides to identify as something else in their gender, that they don't have to notify the parents. Or this whole abortion, if a child wants to have an abortion, that the parents are not engaged in that conversation in high school. Yeah. I just think that is absolutely insane and creating a bigger divide between parents in the school system. And
Yeah.
so that's you can't. I don't think you can educate well without the parents. Like there has to be a good community connection there. And so if our goal is truly to get our kids equipped to handle the future and like to pass on the culture and to do then we need to give parents the option to do what they feel is best for their kid.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a great discussion so far. I want you to come back here in just a few moments, Jason. I want to cede the bulk of my time to you talking specifically about Litchfield Christian School. This is not one of those episodes where we're just going to bash and dash. We're going to actually talk about solutions and what this man has given his life over to and how we can participate in that. And so we're going to come right back and we're going to talk more about this from the standpoint of Litchfield Christian School. Jason is here to discuss Litchfield Christian School. Who better to discuss it as the founder of the school and visionary of the school? Take us away on that subject matter.
Well, so in our community, we're not any different as far as suffering some of the dilemma that's coming down from the educational pipeline. We have a government that is pushing a lot of policies that just aren't, I don't think, educationally healthy. We have dealt with the effects of Common Core, and so some of the issues that we deal with is 84% of our kiddos are not at grade level in reading and math across the board. There's multiple reasons for that. I mean, everything from poverty to substance abuse to broken families. That whole thing comes in the classroom, and kiddo is traumatized and dealing with all kinds of stuff. There's no way you can expect that teacher to fix all those problems. But the system itself is trying to figure this out, and it's not working. And so the bottom line is some of our kiddos are having a hard time, and our position is we can help ease the burden of that. We're not going to take it over. The public school is always going to be here. There's another private school that's likely always going to be here. They do a fine job, but there's enough kids to go around that we can support our community by having a ministry of education. And I think that's something that God put on my heart a couple of years ago, and I began to really solidify it with as I was praying through things and asking Lord what we're to be doing, finishing up my doctorate of educational ministry. Okay, Lord, what's the next step for us as a church? And this school is kind of that vision. It's that it's the culmination of my experience and my education coming together to provide a light into some of the darkest areas of our community. Litchfield's a fine community. There's a lot of cool things about Litchfield, but we have a few dark spots here that really plague us. Poverty is one of the issues that we struggle with. Substance abuse is something we deal with quite a bit here. Broken family dynamics, cognitive, learning delays, some of those issues. Like 20% of our kids have IEPs, individual educational plans. That's a kind of a high number for a community our size. And then you have the unchurched, right? So you just have this whole culmination of things that are happening. And so when we ask the Lord, how can we bring light to some of the darkest areas of our community? Litchfield Christian School is the thing that God put on our heart. And so as we're praying, Psalm 27:13-14 just talks about seeing the goodness of the Lord, waiting upon him and seeing the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And we want to bring that goodness to our community. And so what we exist, our mission really is to empower children with a Christian education to flourish in the church, community, and home. That's our mission, right? So empower our children with a Christian, Christ-centered, God-honoring, Bible-saturated, rigorous education that will help them to flourish in the three spheres of life: church, community, and home. And this is where everybody does life. So we want them to be active in their church, being not passive, just sitting there kind of absorbing, but leaders and engagers. We want them to be in their community, working and serving and volunteering. And we want them to be good husbands and wives in their homes, leading them the way God wants them to lead in the roles that God has designed them to do. And so when they flourish in those three areas, our whole society flourishes. And to flourish is to thrive, right? It's to be like that flower that blossoms. And that's what we want them to be. We want to create a garden, if you will, of flowers that are just blossoming so that the community itself will blossom. And to do that, we're empowered by the Spirit, or guided by the Word, and fellowship with the church. These are three empowerments. These are support systems that help us to do it. The Spirit's got to be regenerating and doing the work of salvation. That's important. The Word of God has got to be our guide, our authority, and the church has got to be involved in that fellowship, in that community, pouring into this thing, so that we can unite families to the goodness of God. And we can get our families in the goodness of God. We can partner together to strive to provide a robust education for these students so that they can use their gifts, these God-given gifts. They can know the Lord Jesus Christ, and they can use the gifts that He's given them to serve their communities, the church, community, and home, right? So that's carrying out that mission, and that's explaining how we flourish. And to do that, I think to do that well, we've identified there are 6 convictions, core convictions, and there are 6 values that we hold to. And now this is okay. So remember earlier in our conversation, I said there are 3 areas where I think the public school is struggling. And I think any school, I don't care if you're public or private, you've got to have a sound philosophy, you've got to have a sound methodology, and you've got to create a healthy culture. When these things are in play, I think you've got a good atmosphere, if you will, for education, for learning. Okay. So we follow a more perennial type educational philosophy, and that for us has established 6 convictions. First and foremost,
now, can you unpack really quickly what the word perennial means there?
Perennial just means forever. These are long-lasting truths. These are old truths. So we're not reinventing the wheel in education. There's no need to do that. Our ancestors, even our grandparents, have understood how to educate for a long time. They have found methodologies that work, things that help, that can retain information and help you to learn to think critically and wisely, right? Flourishing is to live wisely. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've got a lot of data, if you will, to say, hey, this has worked in the past, this will work in the future. And so when we take a perennial type, it's a kind of a classical liberal arts education. We value certain techniques and value certain curriculum that says this is going to teach the child how to think. Because remember, when a child graduates high school and they go on to college, you're not going to be there every time they make a decision. They're going to have a grid to think through. And so parents and educators, what their job is to teach children to have this grid to think through as they're discerning and problem solving. And that grid is through the fear of the Lord, That grid is through His creational order, how this world actually functions and works. That grid has a moral compass to it, a virtuous compass. And that grid also understands maturity and tradition and things of that nature. So to live wisely, to flourish, you got to create this grid. To create this grid, you have to have certain convictions and values. Number one, we have to believe.
Before you get to those 6 values, would it be helpful to show the video really quickly, a commercial?
Well, the video is simply just going to give you there's nothing explaining there. It's just kind of a show of the school. So it might be better for me to lay it first.
Sure.
And then you can see the kind of video. But to have these convictions, first and foremost, and this is where I think our system went astray. The moment it adopted postmodernism and progressivism, it threw faith out the window. Because essentially what we understand to believe is children are spiritual beings that are made in the image of God. Therefore, we're going to instruct your child's heart and mind to worship God, the fear of the Lord. So when our schools got rid of that was part of our culture. That was one of the core values of our culture. We began to unravel our educational system because we forget that we're spiritual beings made in the image of God, that our heart and our mind needs to be instructed with spirit and truth. Okay, so that's a core conviction for us. Reason. God has endowed children with the ability to reason.
Is this number 2?
This is number 2. And to flourish, we must develop that ability to exercise reason. And we have to teach how to think critically, not just to regurgitate information, but actually how to work through things and exercise discernment and to walk in the knowledge of the Lord. Again, as I talked about, the fear of the Lord, the creational order, the moral, the virtues, and through tradition. And so the ability to think, we have to value that. Wisdom, okay? God has sovereignly set consistent patterns of creational order on the one hand, right? And so the child has to learn educational, patterns. For instance, if you're a farmer and you want to plant corn, you realize that the best time to plant corn is in the spring. You don't want to plant it in December because creation's telling you that's not a good time to plant it.
Okay.
Well, God has given us a creation with all kinds of things to explore and to do. There are patterns set up that if you follow these patterns, you flourish. And so there's a technical side to learning. That's why education needs to be rigorous. It needs to be kind of robust. You have to kind of learn how to manage your creation, whether you're an accountant, a banker, a doctor, a researcher, a construction worker, an electrician, a plumber, whatever you are, there is a wisdom there that you have to know. So there's certain basic subject matters that reveal these patterns to all people. And we have to instruct the heart and the mind to understand the practical wisdom, but we also have to understand the moral wisdom, which is why we value truth. Conviction is that God's truth is the center of all instruction, and teaching truth must be a priority. We don't, this is where, again, we're in conflict with the relativism because we believe there is absolute truth. And we have to teach that truth. We also hold to tradition. That we want to create strong relationships between the past and the present so that we learn from our mistakes and we don't repeat them, and that there's a lot of wisdom to be drawn from the past. And so one of our core convictions is intergenerational relationships. We want to cultivate these because you don't want to separate the young and the old. You want to keep them together because that's how things are passed on. And then finally, our conviction is maturity, just to grow up. God commands that children be discipled into adulthood. And so education has to prepare the child to walk wisely in the fear of the Lord. And that means that we have to come alongside them and say, it's not good for you to be 26 years old in your parents' basement playing video games.
Come on now.
That when you're 18 years old, the expectation—
What you down there doing? You playing some video games?
That's right. The expectation is when you are 18 years old, you're going to be able to graduate our school and have the confidence and the competence to make a decision that for your life, whether you go to college or trade school, even looking at marriage and all that, because I know our culture's like, ooh, don't get married at such a young age. That's nonsense. You don't need to be
shots fired.
You don't need to be sitting there like waiting until you're 30 years old to get married. To walk in the Lord, that is not something that that should be looked down upon. It's something that should be, hey, if you are walking wisely with the Lord and you're growing in wisdom, this is something we can achieve, right? So those are our core convictions. But with those convictions, though, you have to have a value system that helps you accomplish them. And the first thing we need to understand is work ethic. I was just telling my wife, I said, man, Stace, especially with our kids, work ethic, a strong work ethic can overcome a lot of deficits.
Come on now.
You don't have to be the smartest bulb in the box, right? If you have a strong work ethic, you can overcome so much and you can accomplish so much in this world. And so we want to cultivate a work ethic that's valued inside.
Let me ask a question at this point, because I think that there's a lot of people who would watch this, Jason, and they'd be like, of course, work ethic. What do you do with folks who are lightly motivated in terms of work? I'm going to try to find a nice way to say that. Y'all lazy. What do you do with the perennially lazy folks that are out there? Are we back to a corporal punishment system here, or are we
right? Get that paddle out.
Bust that tail.
In your face. So when you're looking at a kiddo in education, you have two types of motivation. You have this intrinsic motivation, right? That inner side, that inner self, that that says, I need to do a good job because this is the right thing to do. That's an intrinsic motivation. And then you have this external motivation that says, I should do right by other people. I should help that person. In our culture right now, you're having a lot of kiddos lacking both.
Mm.
They're just not
Yes, we do.
motivated. And part of the reason is, well, if you're coming out of, if your life is dealing with poverty and substance abuse and broken families, the trauma that comes from that. And then on top of that, you have a learning disability. There's a lot to be motivated by, right? So I think one of the things that we do is one, we have to, on the one hand, you have to teach virtue. So virtue is something that's intentionally taught. For instance,
that's good. That's
like
good.
intellectual courage, right? Intellectual courage, to have the courage to do what is right, the motivation that the to your deed must be good, it must be reasonable, it must be acted upon.
Yes.
And to teach that courage, carefulness, to teach how to be careful. Not one of the things that's killed the New York Times, I think, in the last 10 years is they've lost so much credibility because they weren't careful. They were so quick to jump onto something, or so quick to jump on a story without looking at the credibility of their sources. So teaching kids to be careful, having a certain degree of tenacity, right? I love that C.S. Lewis said something like, the only people who achieve much are those who want knowledge so badly that they seek it while conditions are still unfavorable, right?
Come on now, he said something.
So you have to teach,
dropping dimes.
You have to teach tenacity. You have to teach these kids how to have a tenacious spirit about them, to go after understanding the truth, right? Being fair-minded, something our culture cannot do right now.
Hang on one second. Can I go back to tenacity for just a second?
Yeah, tenacity.
We just watched this movie, and I know it's been out for a while, but maybe I can commend this movie to others to watch. During our family movie time, we watched a movie called The Boys in the Boat. I don't know if you've heard about that. But it's the rowing team at the University of Washington versus a lot of the Ivy League schools. And I won't do any spoilers here, but let's just say they came from less than adverse conditions. They were competing against the elite. They were competing against the well-funded. And they found that their pathway to success was through a certain measure of tenacity. Because if you don't have the money, and to your point, Jason, if you don't have the education, whether tools or just natural facilities in terms of education, and you're behind in terms of learning disabilities, and you're behind in some of the cultural circumstances that you're facing, good God, you need to have some tenacity in life. You're not going to get anything done if you're just going to continue to be a victim to all the different circumstances.
Oh my gosh, get rid of the victim mentality. Good grief.
Yes, and so I hear you guys, and I'm excited about the fact that you guys are doing something about the victim mentality in people who could easily claim, well, I do actually have a disability. And listen, we're not saying that those things don't matter. Don't hear us say that. Don't hear what we didn't say.
That's right.
But we're saying that if tenacity is not something that we're going to employ in life with those things that we have to deal with, then what the heck are we doing?
Right. So maybe one of the questions out there is, well, okay, Jay, it sounds great, but how in the world do you do it? I think what you do is you start the kids off. Like, here's just a practical example. So we're not just talking about pie in the sky philosophy, but we're talking about, okay, so you have a couple of kids who are reading a book. Let's say it's a hard book. Let's say we're in high school, right? And the kids have got to read War and Peace, classic European literature. It's massive work, and it's a big deal. And I'm using kind of an extreme here, okay? Because I know there are teachers out there saying we ain't reading War and Peace in high school, but maybe you can. And you have two friends who are going to face War and Peace. Well, one friend is ready to tackle the book and get after it. And she gets a couple of 100 pages in and realizes, good grief, this is a hard work, but she continues through it, right? And she begins to work through that. Oh, I want to quit. Oh, this is boring. Oh, I don't like this. Oh, I get to the point already. Oh, whatever, right? And she fights through it and she gets through it. And now she is on the other side of the book. And what does she gain from that? She has gained this idea of understanding how now to analyze, better equipped to analyze literature, and she's able to understand European history and European politics, and she's able now to take everything she's learned from that book and to have a different category to view the world through, so she can now discern. The other friend, on the other hand, when she reaches that point of this is boring, I don't like this, and this is not my thing, and she turns the book off, she closes the book and she turns on an old episode of Friends. She has now lost the tenacity to finish anything. She's not equipped in the European classes. She's not equipped to now use those skills and elsewhere, and she hasn't trained herself to do it outside of high school. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Now you can take that same example and apply it to little kids in elementary school, getting them to start something and finish something, getting them to putting the value on making sure you finish what you start. That's building tenacity. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so you have to teach children to do that. You have to teach children to be fair-minded, to be able to look at all the facts, and to not be so invested personally into one position that you're not willing to seek the truth. Intellectual curiosity, right? Exploring things, which is something we're going to do in our class. In our school, we have something called Sponge Room that we get from John Savage at the Academy of Individual Excellence. And Sponge Room is the place where they can have this intellectual curiosity. They can kind of learn and explore. Honesty, good grief, being honest about the truth and whether you're right or you're wrong. And if you're wrong, getting rid of the bad, right, getting into the good, and being able to cite work. Do you realize how many American students plagiarize in college? I just read it's in the high 80s. It's in the high 80s that plagiarism is outrageous in college right now because we lack honesty in our intellectual pursuits. And of course, humility. You know what I'm saying? Just having this idea of humility. So when we talk about, being
and each of those is a show in and of itself, Jason.
Oh my gosh, you could do a whole series on this whole thing. Philip Dow wrote an excellent book. If you want to read a book called Virtuous Minds, Intellectual Character Development, I would highly recommend that book by Philip E. Dow. He grew up as a missionary to Kenya. He's got his doctorate from Cambridge, and he's now in Kenya running a school. And he's written a really wonderful book on intellectual development, intellectual character development. I would highly recommend the book. And and that's something that we want to embrace as our core values. So we talk about work ethic, and we talk about like responsibility, accountability, courage, compassion, and excellence. We're drawing on these virtues of intellectual character, and we want to develop those things at our school. That's going to create a culture inside of our school that fits with our methodology and our philosophy, and that's where it's safe and it's good and it's creative, and we're learning to critically think, and we're learning to explore, and we're doing it wisely because we're doing it in the fear of the Lord, and we're doing it with the virtues that Jesus is honored with and that he will bless. And that's what we want to do at Litchfield.
Yeah. So let me do this. Let's land the plane here the next 5 minutes or so with our summary and our wrap up for today. However, Jason won't do this. I don't think he should do this, but I'm going to do this. You can see that this man, if you cut him, he bleeds Bible and Christian school education, kind of like Spurgeon. If you cut him, that's what he bleeds. That is this man. And so don't anybody jump in the comment section. Don't anybody say anything. Don't even whisper to yourself in your own mind anything about this man has not put in a lifetime worth of work in this subject field, in this area field, doctoral level, PhD level work that he has done in regards to this subject matter, as well as the experiential component, as well as the fact that he's practically putting his hands on this subject matter and the intensity of prayer and all the different understanding that he has for his community. And so lest any of us come away from this thinking that this man just got up today and just decided he would just be mad at the public school or be mad about the situation. No, this is a man who is a doer. All right, we're going to do our summary.
Government officials insist that
Let me just go real quick and then I'm going to let you cook.
Yeah.
All right. I need some music because we can't be cooking without our music. Okay. Education. What's the Christian to do about education in this world? I think that a verse that has been the imprint of our family and the hallmark of what I've tried to do, both with my individual education as far as my family education, and then fanning that out into other forms of education, is that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. We make a sweeping and profound theological statement, believer who is watching this today, when the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, when that is the reference point by which we are able to do all the different things that Jason has talked about in this show, to evaluate whether we are hearing truth, to evaluate whether the facts that are being lined up before us are leading us in a particular direction that is away from truth, evaluating systems, evaluating the impact of those systems, evaluating all the different things that are going on in our lives, and so that we're not just jumping at education from our own personal preference. We're not just jumping at education from what are people around us doing, or the educational limitations that we have. This understanding of the Lord and who the Lord truly is so revolutionary that it impacts everything in our lives. The gospel changes everything in our lives. And not only is this education, because it is education, something that starts at a point in time, but it starts and it moves into eternity. And so this is, Jason, what I'd like to see as justification meets sanctification goes into glorification, and the thread that binds all of those things together is an educational process that moves us into ever-increasing knowledge of who Jesus is and how we might rightly respond to him in the world.
That's good, because that's why we see education as a ministry of the church. We're not separated from the church. We want to be empowered by the Spirit, guided by the Word, in fellowship with the church, because we see the same thing you just said: justification, sanctification, glorification, a thread that's tying all the way. How do we live the good life? How do we live wisely? How do we live rightly? That's the Sermon on the Mount, right? That's Jesus telling you how to live in the kingdom now. And education is the means to do that to a lot of these kids and a lot of these families. And we get the opportunity to disciple them to the cross, through the cross, and into eternity. And we want to use that opportunity to help them have on the one hand, an understanding of who Jesus is, what the gospel means for them, and what does it mean to flourish inside of God's way of doing things. At the same time, equip them to wisely walk in this world, whether it's professionally, morally, or growing up into maturity. We want to be that means of grace to them. And that's what education is meant to be, I think. Our community to Litchfield and Hillsborough and the surrounding areas is we want to be a means of grace to our families, to unite them to the goodness of the Lord, right, through this educational. So to empower our children with Christian education so that they flourish, their families flourish, and the church, the community, and home. And we're going to knock it out. I know it's going to happen. We're going to do it because God's going to show up big, and it's going to be a great thing. Great thing. And you want to be a part of that thing, be a part of it.
All right.
Pray like crazy. Pray
Folks,
like crazy.
We've got our most viewership right now because you guys wanted to see how we land the plane today. But don't just let us land the plane. I want you to land the plane with getting out your checkbook and writing this man a check. How do they do that?
Litchfield Christian School. Write it out. Anything. If you can send it to First Baptist Church, that's at 608 North Van Buren Street, Litchfield, Illinois, 62056. That would be probably the best way. That money goes straight to scholarships. All money pretty much goes straight to scholarships.
You said $4,000 to $4,300 per student.
Thereabouts. That's the average tuition. A little bit less for preschoolers, unless you're full time. A little bit more for high school, but that's us trying to make. We're not paying our teachers very much. It's going to take very special people to work at our school. Missions minded, children loving, God honoring, Bible saturated, Christ exalting type people who are not dependent on one income. So, we're having to use all of our funds to really make sure that these guys are taken care of as best we can, these teachers that God brings us. So the money that we receive really goes to the scholarship fund to pay for a lot of the kiddos that we're going to be receiving because we don't turn away special needs kids. We don't turn away.
Okay.
We bring in, autism, it's not Asperger's anymore, but those kind of kids. We don't want to turn anybody away because of finances. That's our goal. We want to be able to bring everybody in, and we want to be able to, because we believe the gospel's for everybody, and we're going to make it work.
Yep.
So if you want to be a part of that, be praying specifically for our school teachers, families, to come, wisdom and how to move forward, God providing scholarships for us, and that He'll overcome the barriers that are being put before us, and He'll calm the naysayers.
Yeah, and you'll be, y'all gonna have to shut that mouth in Litchfield once this thing gets going. All right, we're gonna end with the video today, and it's about 1 minute and 20 seconds long. This is our sizzle reel. You guys have come, and this is a great episode. We'll be saying more about this, but we wanted to do a special episode on education. Here's Litchfield Christian School. This is the Way Forward Show, and on the way out, here is a special video.